Hey, welcome back to the Sunday Serving channel, where you come every week for words from the gospel, hope, joy, purpose, sometimes some salt.
Yeah.
And anyways, truth from the gospel. Happy 4th of July weekend. Couldn't find anything in the Bible about the 4th of July. There's a lot about freedom, actually.
Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord.
All right, well, on a beautiful sunny day like this, just reflecting on the teaching and the work of Jesus. If you had to pick one word that summarizes the work of Jesus, TJ, what would that be?
Ooh, I would say, I mean, it would have to be 2 words or 3 words, but...
2, I said 1.
Well, life, definitely.
Life, okay. Life.
In the sense of the power of life. Life conquering death. Yeah, life as a force, as a power. The God of life. That theme.
Yeah. And sometimes what Jesus came, because there was, God created life, right?
Yeah.
He sent Jesus because we needed new life or rebirth.
Yeah.
We needed healing.
It's true.
How about the word healing?
That too. Physical healing, emotional, spiritual healing, all those things.
And that's one, when I was talking about action, that's kind of what I think of with Jesus, is healing.
Yeah.
It's an active force of love that that made, sick people well, lepers, cast out demons, so emotional healing, spiritual healing. So if you go to the Gospels, you go to Matthew, we will get back to the Sermon on the Mount. I know we've had some requests to keep working through the Sermon on the Mount. But right after the Sermon on the Mount, so early in Matthew, it comes back to 3 stories of healing in Matthew 8 that I love. And if you look at them all 3 together, it kind of gives a picture of how Jesus worked healing in people's lives. So I thought we could read those 3 stories from the beginning of Matthew chapter 8.
That's a great idea.
Is that a good idea?
Let's do it.
I'll start. We might stop in between, talk a little bit, then you can do some reading. So it starts about the leper. Jesus cleanses a leper. When he came down from the mountain, so that was after teaching the Sermon on the Mount, great crowds followed him, and behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for proof to them. Now, there's a lot in that story. I know you're thinking right here, your wheels are turning. But there's a lot of important stuff in this.
Yeah, there is.
First of all, Jesus comes down from the mountain, so there must have been, it said crowds are following him.
Right.
So that makes you wonder how many people witnessed this. They must have, but and why would he say don't tell anyone about it? But maybe we should start with just the fact that it's someone afflicted by leprosy. This first healing miracle recorded here is a leper. What is it about leprosy and lepers that's significant in the Bible? Wasn't that kind of like the worst thing that could happen to someone? It's like kind of a symbol of
one of
damnation almost.
Well, a symbol of exclusion or being set outside the community. Going back to the time of Leviticus, Yes, it was definitely one of the worst. And I should also say, just for the sake of being straightforward about these things, the word that's used,
Yeah.
it's actually a bigger category of diseases than leprosy. But the specific thing about leprosy that made it such a horrible disease, such a feared disease, is when you have anything that involves, infections or anything that involves the actual deterioration of your body. So not like, for instance, something in your lungs that you can't see, but when it's something visible that you can see, they saw it as kind of walking the line between life and death, right? Mm-hmm. So, for instance, when someone is...
Well, leprosy was known as the slow death, right?
Yeah,
because it was a slow progression, and it was very visible, like you say. It created these lesions, and then eventually your fingers would fall off in your hands.
Yeah.
It was very contagious. They were very scared of it.
Yeah, so
if cast out of society.
If you look at what it says in the Old Testament about diseases, they only really care about those diseases that are very visible. And whether it be someone who's is wounded and bleeding, they're also ritually impure. They have to go outside the camp. Mm-hmm. Whatever. But the point is, God is a God of life, mm-hmm. and anything that looks like death, whether it be a wound or leprosy or mm-hmm. anything, is antithetical.
Right.
So that's why going from the time of Moses all the way to the time of Jesus, something like leprosy that's so visible, so in your face, this person is dying.
There was a lot of law, like excluding.
Yeah.
Well, you say it's more than just leprosy, but it says a leper, right? So from society, so they were not allowed to be touched, right? They had to live separately.
Right.
There was even a distance prescribed, and I think that they were kind of seen as God's judgment is on you. They were outcasts. It really must have been a terrible thing. But here, regardless, this leper approached Jesus. He wasn't invited. The disciples didn't say, "Come, Jesus is going to now open up for healing ministries at 9:30 in the morning, so you can come and make an appointment." Mm-hmm. This leper, who was supposed to be separate and outcast, approached Jesus,
mm-hmm. which was taking
uninvited, taking a risk.
Taking a huge
He didn't
risk.
know that Jesus was going to heal him.
Right.
And it's interesting. It says here, he came to him and knelt before him. So just that act there, mm-hmm. he didn't dare touch him. He came, approached him, he knelt. So he's worshiping. He's bowing mm-hmm. down before Jesus. Mm-hmm. He's showing his humility. Mm-hmm. Isn't that an act of worship? Was that considered an act of worship?
Yes, it was.
So, and here Jesus didn't proclaim himself as the Savior, but this leper knelt down before him.
And then there's another fascinating little hint that the leper knew what was going on. So he says, "If you will."
Yeah.
That word "will" is the same word as favor in the year of the Lord's favor in that passage from Isaiah that Jesus read in the Nazareth synagogue. So it's a mess.
This is the year of our Lord's favor.
Yeah, like
if you will. That was.
It's interesting. What the leper is saying is, if you favor, if it is your favor, you can heal me. So the leper gets it. The leper is like, this. The
leper must have known that Jesus was the Son of God.
Yeah.
And I love that too, because it says, "If you will." So he didn't question if you can.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you could do this, maybe you can't. No, the leper knew that Jesus could heal him. Yeah. But the question was, if Jesus, if you're willing, if it's in your favor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cleanse me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Jesus' response to the leper,
"I will.
I will."
Yeah.
So yes, it is. Jesus wants to heal you. He wanted to heal this leper. "I will be cleansed." But now more than that, he could have just said it, right? Yeah. He could, because the next miracle we'll talk about, mm-hmm. Jesus just said it. Mm-hmm. We were talking about the word last week, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But Jesus didn't do that. Here's a leper that you're not supposed to touch. You're not even supposed to be 5 feet away from.
Yeah.
If you're downwind, you're supposed to be 45 feet away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Jesus reached out and touched this leper.
Yeah.
He reached out. He didn't have to. Stretched out his hand, touched him, saying, "I will be clean."
And that's another good point. The fact that Jesus reached out and touched the leper, and that then there's no mention of like, oh, Jesus had to go, take a bath or something. Yeah. That says a lot about who Jesus thought he was and who people understood him
He
to
was
be.
so willing to break the law of Moses for the sake of righteousness, for the sake of God, because there was a greater law coming in here.
Yeah, but also even and as well as that, this whole thing that Jesus as a healer, the force of life, the power of life comes from him.
Right.
And he can overcome all these ritual impurity things about like bodily fluids and infections and limbs falling off and all that. Like
through Jesus everything is made well,
exactly,
is healed, is clean. There is no need. It's clean. It's forgiven. Right.
Yeah.
So that's like that part where he says you're forgiven before he healed someone. Yeah. That's even a greater power. So so Jesus, and there's something, you've healing and you've cleansing. Are they? I think they're distinct. I mean, healing is being made whole, cleansing is being made right or righteous or forgiven. Isn't that something to do with being forgiven?
But you ask all the good questions. In the Gospels, sometimes, I can't remember how many times, but it's quite a few times, when there's a healing story, the word that's used is saving, not healing. So
interesting.
It's
it's metaphorical, but it's real. Yeah. Jesus was real. He lived in the flesh and blood. Yeah. And so everything became real and became spiritual at the same time. Because God is a creator. I mean, it makes perfect sense. God is a creator of heaven and earth.
Saving can also be physical.
Of your soul, of your body. Yeah. And he touched him and he said, I will be cleansed. And then, that's not the end of it. So first he says, don't tell anybody about it. And it doesn't say anything in Matthew, but in Mark, I think it says specifically that the guy disobeyed and went and told everybody. I guess Jesus didn't want a scene. He didn't want popularity. Maybe there's more to it than that. But then, what I find interesting is he told him to go back to the priest. In other words, to make right by law. So Jesus is using the law here. First he's transgressing it. Then he's telling this guy to go and follow the law and do the proper procedure. Because there was something in the law about how you could be cleansed of leprosy, but you had to give certain sacrifices and do a whole bunch of rituals. He's telling him to go do that. I don't know what you think, but I think it's because Jesus wanted this miracle, this cleansing, this healing, to have a positive effect in this man's life and his family. In other words, it wouldn't go do it by law, and then you really can live as a whole.
You can be welcomed back into the community.
Man, welcome back into your family.
Come live with your.
So just that love, that care that Jesus showed, and his willingness. Actually, it's a humility. He's God. He's God's son. He can do whatever he wants, but yet he works through the law that was there.
As he said in the Sermon on the Mount, he didn't come to abolish, but to fulfill.
To fulfill. So do you have any thoughts on that, on the why he sent it back to the priest?
I think it's a very good point that you made. If this man hadn't gone back to the priest, then people wouldn't have believed him. He would have had to probably walk into his house and take off his shirt and show them, hey, I'm healed.
He might have still had to live by those laws of being separate and so on. They might not have accepted him back.
But if it had the official stamp of approval of the priest, then he could have just gone right back to his kids and his family or whoever he was living with.
So that's the healing of a leper. Should we let's keep going here.
Up to you,
would you like to read the next one? It's the Centurion. Another. I mean, we can spend as much time on this one. The faith of a centurion. I love this one, and it's completely different, but it's here, and it's right next. It's the next story. Verse 5.
When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, Go, and he goes, and to another, Come, and he comes, and to my servant, Do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, Go, let it be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment.
Wow.
That's a great story.
I love that. So there's so much there too. I mean, so first of all, this man, a centurion, he's not just not a Jew or an Israelite, right? He's a foreign invader. He's not just a soldier, but he's a commander, right? A centurion, you're a commander of 100 men. So you're ranking Roman occupying army officer, obviously a man of character and faith. Why would he come to Jesus? It's pretty early on in the ministry, but yet he was aware enough of what's going on that he knows there's this man Jesus who's healing people.
To add one more layer to that,
Yeah.
I can't remember the reference in the Gospels, but there's one reference that talks about how the centurion built the synagogue at Capernaum, and that brings up. Those of you who have your Bible apps open can look for it. That brings up the category of God-fearers that we see in the book of Acts. I think that goes back to the time of Jesus' lifetime easily.
Sure.
People who were not Jews, but who respected the God of Israel and respected the Jews. And I think this guy was one of them.
He might have been living there. That was his post for years, and
he probably got
maybe
to know
he was
them.
a man of faith before that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, he comes to Jesus, and again, he's not seeking. It speaks to his character. He's not seeking something for his own personal health or gain. It's not him. It's not his son. It's not his daughter. It's not his wife who's asking for a miracle. It's his slave, right?
Yeah.
His slave, and I mean, masters were supposed to be good to slaves, and many were, I'm sure.
But many weren't also.
Many weren't. I mean, he had a right to, if one of his slaves got injured or ill, he could have killed him.
Yeah.
Without any penalty.
Right.
They were expendable.
Right.
But no, he wanted this. He cared enough about this servant, the slave, that he asked Jesus to heal him. But then, this is remarkable. So here, we were talking about Jesus touching a leopard, right? This centurion knew that just the fact that Jesus was willing to come, didn't Jesus, he said he would come to his house.
Yeah.
There was another transgression of law, right? Because
Yes,
Jesus, as a Jew, was not
shouldn't have done
allowed
that,
into the house of a Gentile.
Right.
And I think this centurion must have known that and said, wait, you don't need to do that. I know about authority. All you have to do is say the word, right? So what faith? And Jesus admired that faith, and he used this healing miracle as a chance to speak to the righteous Jewish people around him, saying, here's an example. I haven't seen this kind of faith throughout the house of Israel. And he has that little lesson. Actually, Jesus preached a little bit of hell and brimstone there because, he said many
the sons of the kingdom being excluded.
He said many of the Gentiles who are not considered children of Abraham will come to the kingdom of God, but there's some sons of the king that will be cast into how does he say it there?
While the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Right. So it wasn't all roses with Jesus. He wasn't scared to talk about hell.
Right.
And judgment.
Right.
But he always had mercy. He always wanted to heal. And he was using this as a teaching moment. Hey, you can have faith. And
it's within your reach.
He gave the word, and at that very hour, the servant was healed. So the previous miracle, Jesus was willing to touch a leper, did touch a leper, and said, I will. This one, he marveled at the faith of this, quote, unrighteous foreigner, and said, look, by faith, one word, it can be done. And let's talk about the third miracle here. Is there more you want to say about the centurion?
No, that's good. That's good. We can,
So the next one. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and began to serve him. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and he healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases. So I love that because now this is the third story. So a leper comes to him, worships him, he touches him, transgresses the law, tells him to go and make it right with the priest. The centurion comes and they have that exchange about faith. And then now you think his work's over, and he goes to Peter's house, one of the disciples, and Peter's mother-in-law, so Peter was obviously married. He had a house. They must have gone there a lot. And again, this wasn't Peter saying, hey, Jesus, by the way, my mother-in-law is ill. Can you come help out here? Or wasn't met at the door by a request. It just says he noticed it. So Jesus sees the big things, the problems. He responds, and the little things that he probably wouldn't have to notice. She might have been quietly lying in next door. He noticed that she was sick with a fever. He touched her hand. He didn't say anything. He just touched her hand. And the fever left her. But this is the part I like. So what does this mother-in-law do? It doesn't say what her name was. Do you know what her name was?
No, I don't know.
She rose and served. And I love that. You know, when we're freed, Jesus does still heal today. And when we experience that kind of, whatever the kind of healing is, here's a good example. Peter's mother-in-law rose and began to serve him. And then, so it's just, there's a lot of nuance there, right? And just in those three stories. And then he talks about how he healed. They brought many more to him that evening still, who he healed,
cast out
demons.
Yeah.
And then he ends with saying this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illness. Jesus took our illnesses and bore our diseases. And I guess that's a foreshadowing of the crucifixion, because it doesn't ever, say that Jesus became ill or, what the suffering to him was.
Yeah, but
until he
it's true.
was persecuted, right?
That's true, but it does go back to what I tried to say earlier about Jesus. Somehow, through Jesus, life is stronger than death, and he could take those diseases away. And
he could absorb that.
Yeah.
The struggle between good and evil. Is real. Jesus, God, can absorb that and can bring righteousness and healing, goodness, wellness, wholeness. It cost something. It cost Jesus suffering and dying for him to do that. And in the same way Jesus tells us, we need to bear up our cross and follow him and be willing to suffer, but yet he is there to heal. So there's a lot of mystery. I think that we will continue having to take life as it comes on faith, but believe in God, the giver of life, and in Jesus, Son of God, who is sent to heal, to make well, to bring new life. So I hope you were blessed by those passages and those stories. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.
And happy 57 to this guy.
57 what?
It's your birthday.
Oh, we all have those once a year.
Yeah. Happy
So God
birthday.
bless you. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. See you later.